Good evening, everyone. I'm Mayor Linda Newing, and I'm calling to order the Newcastle City Council special meeting of Tuesday, October 3, 2023. The time is 5:30 p.m. Let the record show that all council members are present. This public meeting is being recorded and may be viewed later on the city's YouTube channel. The City Council will now recess into executive session for approximately 30 minutes to consider matters related to RCW 42.30.1101I. Executive sessions are closed to the public pursuant to state law. Council anticipates returning at 6 p.m. Good evening, everyone. I'm Mayor Linda Newing. Council has just returned from executive session where this session lasted approximately 15 minutes. No final actions were taken during the executive session. The time is now 6 p.m. I would like to call to order the Newcastle City Council study session for Tuesday, October 3. Tonight's study session agenda will be the preliminary 2024 budget study session presentation. And with that, I will turn it over to City Manager Scott Pingle.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. Are you moving my slides for me? Okay. Again, as we've discussed previously, the goal, I guess, would be for tonight. We want to try to get through all funds other than the general fund, and then save the general fund discussion for the October 17th study session. Really, it's that depends on council questions and the discussion, and we'll get as far as we can get, and we'll go from there. I think I let the council know previously, and maybe just for the public's benefit, the presentation wasn't necessarily put in order to just go in order fund by fund as it occurs in the preliminary budget. It was kind of put in order to hit the more straightforward funds, or the funds that are debt service doesn't take a lot of discussion. We have debt, and we have places where that money comes in, and it's a straightforward fund. And so really the easy funds first, get into the operating funds other than the general fund, and then walk through the capital projects. Go next. This is just a pretty basic org chart. Go next. And so the way I wanted to start off was just because it affects all funds, was just to hit on our staffing adjustments, and then hit on interfund service charges as those charges hit the funds that we'll cover today. So walking through those adjustments and the changes that will affect everything, not just one fund or another. So in the preliminary 2024 budget, our staffing is reduced from 28.6 FTEs to 23.6 FTEs. It includes 4% COLA for staff, along with the potential for a 3% merit increase. That is per the city's salary compensation policy. It also has a 7% medical increase and 4% increases for dental and vision benefits. And we'll get actual numbers for those before we have a final. And so we'll adjust accordingly. Again, the position adjustments included combining the city clerk and human resources director positions, removing the communications manager, vacant senior planner, vacant building inspector, and vacant accounting analyst positions from the budget. We had the question previously about what for the salary and benefits, what those percentages represented. And so for the included positions, so just for that 23.6 that are moving forward to 2024, the total salary and benefits impact is about $179,000, $120,000 of that in the general fund. But I think the bigger story is the savings. So the total salary and benefits budget change from 2023 to 2024 is an overall salary and benefits decrease of about $731,000, and even bigger in the general fund, just because that's where the changes hit the most. And so a decrease of $733,000, almost $734,000 as far as salary and benefits in the general fund. And so just because I was curious, looking at the total numbers, and with this year going from 23 to 24 and having a fairly major staffing reduction, and then with staff turnover during the year as well. I was just curious, okay, considering salary and benefits for just those positions moving forward, the 23.6, what was the overall increase? And it was a 5.8. So if you take the overall increase and take the average, it was a 5.8% increase per staff person per FTE, as far as the impact of just those positions. Any questions on that? Okay. So as we discussed it briefly at the last meeting, one of the tools that we're recommending we implement for the 2024 budget, it's included in the preliminary budget, is the interfund service charges. So this would be a general fund revenue, but an additional expenditure for the street fund, the swim fund, parks capital, and transportation capital. And so I just kind of wanted to walk through how we get there. So in general, the interfund service charges is simply a way for the general fund to recoup the administrative costs that it spends on other funds. And so our administrative costs are all borne by the general fund, but those functions serve all funds of the city. And so there's certain costs that are not eligible to be included in those, and so those are removed out of the eligible costs. And then because we have on the capital side, because those projects are high dollar, we just take a percentage of those, and so the value of those capital projects, we take 15%, rather than the full value, just because we're going to have one project that costs $1.3 million, we're not going to take the full value of that, just because that doesn't provide a true picture of the administrative burden of that. And so it takes the full value of the operating funds, so swim and street, and then just that percentage of the capital funds. And so with the total, then you have an amount of the general fund that needs to be distributed between the general fund and the other four funds that are going to be charged interfund service charges. So even though we don't charge the general fund because the other funds are going to be a revenue for the general fund, we still come up with a general fund amount. It's just so that we can have a distribution. So that's what that 3.1 million is. That's the amount of the general fund that we can distribute for administrative costs. And then for that amount, we break out the share of that between the public works funds and the general fund. And so that breakout is 79 to 21%. So 79% of that is in the general fund, 21% of that is in the other funds. And so that becomes how we calculate out what the general fund owes, but we don't charge it to the general fund because it would owe itself, and then what the other funds are going to owe. And then the other funds owe based on their percentage of that total. So the 21% from the public works share turns out to be the 672,270, and then based on the other fund's share of that 672,270 gets parsed out to those four funds. And so essentially the math I'm trying to show you is we get to the general fund amount to distribute, we break that out between the share between the general fund and the public works funds, and then just doing the math backwards to get back to where we get to the total to distribute. Is essentially what I'm trying to show the council. Something to remember with the interfund service charges is that this is all based on budgeted funds. One of the things that we'll have to do each year as a part of we always do our first budget amendment usually is that true up budget amendment where we take ending fund balance and include it in an amended budget for the year. Part of that process now we'll true up the interfund service charges based on actual costs, and so those public works funds will owe based on the actual costs of the general fund and those funds rather than the budgeted costs. Any questions there? Okay. All right. Like I said, debt service fund, really just showing We have a transfer in from the Transportation Capital Fund. That's for the May Creek Bridge loan. And then looking on the expenditure side, that's for the Public Works Trust Fund, that's the May Creek Bridge loan. And then the transfer in from facilities is for City Hall, and that's the general obligation bonds. Any questions on debt? Okay. Equipment rental. Again, I wanted to emphasize, as we've kind of learned over the last several months and gone searching for what we might have in place, we don't have a fully fledged out equipment rental fund program, which we'll establish in 2024 and make a point of presenting that to the council and answering questions and making sure everybody understands how that's supposed to work so that that can be implemented for 2025. A couple of things that were my mistakes putting the presentation together. We're not replacing the 2022 Exmark. It's an older one. We replaced the last one in 2022. The snow equipment and service body, and then the Ford F-550. So the 92,000 and then the 85,000 at the bottom there. That's the purchase of a vehicle, and then the snow equipment for the vehicle. Our de-icer tank replacement, it's in disrepair. It's leaking. We need to upgrade it. And then the water trailer and heated pressure washer. That's one that we're excited to get purchased simply because we have to rent that out currently. And so we spend a decent amount just renting a water trailer and pressure washing and the cost that it takes to rent those. We want to purchase them so we have them and go from there. Any questions on equipment rental?
Councilmember Charbonneau.
Thank you. Are any of these vehicles encompassed by our sort of electrification effort? I know we're trying to look towards that with some of our public works vehicles.
They're not. So there's not, the main ones that would be on there would be if we were going to start looking at our trucks. But the market is certainly not at a place to where that would be, we could do it. It would be really difficult to do that right now.
Okay. Yeah, I was just curious. I knew that was a goal we had, so thank you.
Councilmember Villasenor.
Thank you. Maybe in the, you probably don't have it now, but it would be nice to know what the expected life cycle for these things would be.
Yes, so that's why we want to put together a built-out equipment rental program in front of the council, because it'll take into consideration all those things. The way that it should work is that we would have all of our vehicles and equipment basically with the life cycle, and then based on that life cycle, what it's going to cost to replace at the end of its life cycle, so that we are funding it each year, so that when we get to the end of that vehicle's life cycle, it's not a question of do we have the money to buy a new vehicle. We put the money aside over the last 10 years to replace that vehicle, and it's there. And that's just simply not what we have currently.
Any other questions? I have a couple, actually. Are we still charging our copiers to equipment rental?
Just the maintenance cost, yes.
Okay. And then the de-icer tank replacement, is the existing one going to get us through the winter?
Yes, so it still works,
Okay.
but it
We don't
it's
need to
not
Band-Aid it?
we can Band-Aid it until we get it replaced.
Okay. Thank you.
Go next. Community reserve, what's in the preliminary budget is we don't anticipate spending any of the currently allocated $250,000 for the downtown improvements in the pandemic relief plan. I've kind of summarized it there. I think the wording in the pandemic relief plan is marketing, technical assistance, and downtown improvements. And so we've put that full amount in the 2024 budget, and the 2023 projected has zero for that, because we don't think we'll spend money this year. And then the 565 is the transfer out to the street fund, to keep the street fund whole based on needing, financial policies tell us that we need to keep 25% in reserve.
Questions? Okay, keep it rolling.
REIT, we've pulled expected REIT down a bit. I hope that actually REIT's down from budgeted in the current year, with our single-family homes seem to be moving. So we'll hope that that'll at least stay at where we're at current year and maybe build a little bit. Investment revenue is really strong, which is helpful. And then as far as transfers out, we've got the $3 million going to Transportation Capital Fund. A major chunk of that is because we took that amount out of the current year because we weren't going to get the T47 project done in the current year and then got pushed to next. The $25,000 is to the capital fund, and then facilities. The $535 is for generator for City Hall, which we're applying for a grant for, and then that goes to the facility at the annex. We had the leak, the bathroom leak, and so part of that is for bathroom renovations, fixing the elevator, and then a generator as well at the annex. Questions there? All right, so this is where I tried to give you page numbers for your printed copies, if that's helpful. So what I wanted to do with the facilities, street, and swim operating funds was just to go through the major changes, the line items that have big changes, and what those are and why. And so wanted you to be able to reference the 2023 number versus the 2024 number in your printed budgets if you want to do that. So looking at the facilities fund revenue, the City Hall base income and the City Hall CAM income, those are basically based on projections we get from our property manager, but essentially those projections come from our lease agreements and then our maintenance of the City Hall property overall.
Mayor Sherlock.
Sorry. Thank you. Is this on, do you mean page 14 on here
Yes.
or in our book? Okay, thank you.
And then the transfer in from REIT is just based on the capital projects that we have slated for it that we just talked about. Go next. And then on the expenditure side, the major changes, the big one is one of the things you'll see in all of the funds is that we're, rather than the general fund, similar to the interfund service charges, but rather than the general fund eating all of our liability insurance costs, those costs are going to get spread to the other funds that share liability. So in the facilities fund, we've put the property portion into the facilities funds because that's the insurance for our facilities. And so the $50,725 isn't, it's an increase of that because we started at zero. Nothing was in it before. And so now that amount is what's being sent or being, the facilities fund will cover. And so that's a new cost based on the general fund not bearing all those insurance costs. The reduction of $45,000 for repairs and maintenance for the City Hall building. We've been budgeting 60 grand for as far as I could see back, but they were for potential improvements, but they're improvements that aren't necessarily needed yet for the City Hall building. And so I just brought that down to make it more of a true cost rather than what may be needed down the road. And then the increase for maintenance of the city hall property is just the increase estimated by our property manager. And those are the main increases in facilities. Main changes in facilities. Questions on that?
I have a question. Sorry. So you mentioned the insurance is being charged to facilities. Why wouldn't that be charged to risk management?
So the general fund will still bear its portion of liability insurance,
Okay.
but so now will other funds that carry liability.
Okay, understood. Okay.
And so what we've done with the facilities fund specifically is that the property amount of our liability insurance cost will be a facilities fund cost. Other questions? Okay. Street fund. The change in motor vehicle fuel tax, that's based on estimates we get from the state. We are trending short of the 256 that we budgeted for the current year. Really, for the most part, the fuel tax revenues have been flat, and unless the state does something different, we anticipate that those will start to trend down rather than remain flat. The waste management fee, that was a really early number. Just Friday or yesterday, we got the actual increase from waste management, and it'll be about 4.5% and change. And so we'll make that adjustment moving forward. It'll be closer to like 15 grand or 18 grand as far as the percent change. And so on the as far as total numbers on the waste management fee, it rather than going from 210,000 to 215,000, it'll be more like going from 210,000 to 228, 230. And so that we'll make that adjustment. But that was information we got after we put this out. Investment interest. What you're going to see in most of the investment interest lines is different than what we have here for street, simply because what we had budgeted to street was so low to begin with that street will continue to be strong as far as investment interest. And it's actually a $7,000 increase rather than a $10,000 increase. What we plan to do starting in 2024 that we haven't done previously with our investment interest is that that interest has been parsed out to all of our funds based on a preset percentage rather than on those funds' fund balance. And so starting with the new budget, we'll parse out investment interest based on fund balance, because that's that fund. So with our overall money, each fund should get interest based on what it has. And so we'll parse that out differently. As far as we can tell, and just having new staff, that's been based on a preset number that maybe no longer really bears weight as far as, so it's not accurate anymore as far as what each fund's fund balance is. Does that make sense? And then the transfer in, again, oh, sorry, is there a question?
Councilmember Lakota?
So what is the benefit of putting money from reserve directly into street fund versus putting into general? And then, because what we have seen in the past is we will always put anything from the reserve into the general fund, and then as and when it's needed, we will move money from the general fund into whichever fund that's there. The reason I'm asking that question is because once you put money on the street fund, and let's say you don't use the 565, all of it, you cannot move it out from the street fund back into the general fund. But when you have money, when you transfer money from the general fund into street fund, you can only take as and when needed. You don't have to transfer all of it together. So
We would
you
do the
can
same.
keep money in
right.
the, yeah.
We would do the same thing. We wouldn't, the 565 is a budget number. We won't transfer more than we need to keep our 25%.
25% of the reserve.
We have to keep, we have, the transfer into the street fund every year, whether it's coming from REIT or whether it's coming from the general fund, is because we're required, based on our financial policies, to keep 25% of fund balance in the street fund.
Okay,
The street fund can't keep itself whole, and so that's why it's relied on transfers in. But we'll only transfer in what we need to keep the street fund whole. Right, so if we were perfectly accurate in our street fund budget, we would transfer the 565. But when it comes right down to it, we'll see where we're at and we'll transfer what is needed to keep the 25% fund balance.
okay, thank you.
And I hadn't gotten there, but she was jumping on the $251,000 increase. So that, the increase in the need for transfer into the street fund is primarily the addition of liability insurance share for the street fund, and then the interfund service charges. And go to the next, we'll get to that as well. And so there, the fourth and fifth lines down there, those are the new costs. So liability insurance and the interfund service charges cost to the general fund. So it just increases the amount that the street fund is going to be short. The other costs are really just based on trends. The small tools and minor equipment is really just a trending cost. Same with maintenance repair supplies. Those are really in line with where those costs have been, and we're just getting the budget caught up to it. And then, are there questions about that?
Councilmember Clark.
Thank you. This was actually something I had flagged. Could you explain King County Services? Looking in the book, it's a first-time cost for us this year. What exactly does that mean?
I don't think it's a first-time cost.
Well,
So
the reason I
this is-
say it's first time is that there's a number listed and then previous budgeted NA, so it was 0 all the previous years. I'm looking under this would be under Parks, but nevertheless, King County Services on the budget book,
Yeah.
page 96.
So different things in the street fund. This is for third-party repairs that King County helps us with. Now there's a different King County Services that is being added to the parks maintenance, as well as to the facilities fund, but it's much more minor in the facilities fund. So the swim fund, we charge swim fees to all the city parcels, but the swim fund has always borne the cost of that. But our city-owned parcels where there a park or a facility or a city facility is on that parcel should be borne by, in parks, it should be borne by parks maintenance. And for facilities, it should be borne by the facilities fund. And so we have never made that change, and so we're making that change. And so, but that's different in parks maintenance versus in the street fund. The street fund is again trying to catch up costs to what we've been experiencing, or catching up the budget to what we've been experiencing in actual. In the parks maintenance, the change that you'll see there is now charging those swim fees to parks maintenance for the parcels where we have parks. And then it's the same thing with facilities.
Director Bronze had his hand up. He's with us
Go ahead.
virtually. Good evening, Director Bronze.
Hello, sorry, I just have my hand up because I was needing to get joined as a panelist, so my hand can be lowered if it's not already. Thank
All
you.
right, well, welcome.
Thank you.
Okay. If you want to go next.
We talking to me, Scott? Do you want to go next?
Oh, hold on, Jeff. All right. Okay, and then go next. Okay. So swim fund. As far as revenues, what you'll see in the changes, like we just discussed, the big negative there is bringing investment interest down. Again, most of as we go through tonight and then as well as in the general fund, we'll talk about investment interest from the standpoint of that we expect it to remain fairly constant but taper towards the end of next year. So we expect our investment revenue overall to dip next year. But really the main change for some of the funds is that we're going to adjust our approach to how we parse that investment interest out. And so that's what you see there in the swim fund. The swim utility fee, that adding the $78,520, that reflects the 3% rate increase. It also reflects that rate increase with adjusted revenue numbers where revenue for the swim fees has been coming in strong. And then the grant revenue is generally project specific, but with the projects we have going on in the swim fund this year, we're expect about $158,000 more in grant revenue. Questions on those?
Councilmember Clark.
Just to be clear, grant revenue is what we hope to get, right? This is possible grant. This is nothing we have, it's just what we expect possibly. Is that right?
I'll let Jeff, if Jeff wants to talk about that. That's true generally. There are grants that we've received that we'll spend in the next year. I don't have right off the top of my head which ones we've received and which ones we're hoping to get.
So if they're listed in the budget, they are awarded grants. We don't put speculative grants underneath in the line items like that. So there are grants that we've applied for and we've not heard the result and they are not listed there.
Thank you. Let's go next. And then on the expenditure side, for the small tools, minor equipment, again, part of that is just trending costs. And I'll let Jeff chime in if he would like to on getting a drone for inspections. But in general, that allows us to not put a person in a hole or in a place where we'd prefer to not put a person in order to do inspections. Any comments on that, Jeff?
Nope, you covered it. It's for the vaults because you need a confined space permit and extra air monitoring equipment. So a drone can be a much more efficient, we're thinking, way to do these inspections.
And then for the professional services, that's where the big increase generally in the swim operating fund comes from, is we're due for a comprehensive surface water management plan update and then an updated NPDES enhanced maintenance plan so that we can qualify for grants. So that's where that big cost comes from.
Just one thing to clarify, Scott, the enhanced maintenance plan, that's new. That's a new by creating a enhanced maintenance plan, which would be, for an example, would be demonstrating that our past inspection data shows that we can inspect our catch basins on a lower frequency. And once we have an adopted enhanced maintenance plan, and that's adopted by the Department of Ecology, then we would be eligible for a grant. And we're looking at, first up would be using an enhanced maintenance plan grant to purchase a Vector truck. But we first have to get the enhanced maintenance plan qualified and adopted by the Department of Ecology. So that's the work schedule for 2024.
And then like we were talking about the King County Services, the drop for the swim fund is because now that portion is not going to be charged to the swim fund, it'll get charged to parks and facilities as far as the swim fees for city-owned parcels. Again, liability insurance, interfund service charges, those are new costs for that fund. The repairs and maintenance increase for for Vectoring, and then new ditch maintenance. Jeff, do you want to speak to new ditch maintenance?
It's new ditch maintenance. We've not had a formal program before this. There's a contractor that we met, who actually went to a demonstration, and they have a very reasonable cost per linear foot to perform ditch maintenance. We've, up to this point, not had a formalized ditch maintenance program and only responded as needed. So we're gonna try this out and see how it works out.
Thanks, Jeff. And then street sweeping, the increase is just an increase in the contract cost. And then a little increase for professional development. And we'll have a tuition reimbursement for part of that. Any questions on the expenditure side for SWIM? Okay, Jeff, I'm going to hand it off to you to walk through the capital projects.
Certainly, we've talked about this in July most recently, and I don't believe anything's really changed. So I can go over. So the S38 program, that is, we're planning to do an open cut program. Basically, the last couple of years, we've alternated between pipe repairs where it's more efficient to dig up the pipe and put in a new pipe. Or this year we did CIPP, cast in place pipe lining. So next year we're going to go back to doing open cut project. And speaking of grants, we're looking at applying for some grants that we do not. One of the grants is the Opportunity Fund, which is a direct allocation. So those grants are non-competitive. And then we also have applied for another King County Waterworks grant for this project, but that is not listed because we do not know if we've won that or not. Then the S39, that's addressing seepage areas, which become, mainly it's a public safety issue when the sidewalks are either mossy and slippery or in the winter become icy. And that program is on a 3-year rotation, so we do work every 3 years. And we just collect, if you're to go and see Click Fix, there's several locations that have been identified through public requests, and those have been tallied up to address with this program. And then the S40 is a project that is it's in the Landcastle area, which is north of Southeast 76th and west of 116th in that basin to address persistent erosion and water quality. So that's starting off on the preliminary and formal design and public outreach on that project. Any questions?
Nope, none, go ahead.
All right, and then transportation capital, again, we adopted our 6-year TIP in July, and I do not believe there's any changes to what was on the adopted 6-year TIP. So if I just, maybe in the interest of time, I'll just leave it at that, unless anybody has any questions. And one thing to highlight, the grants line item right there, that's for T11. That's a federal grant that we have for the Regional Pavement Set-Aside Program. So that's a 50% match. So we have a $1.2 million program, and we'll have 50% grants, and that's federal money. So with the federal money comes some strings, meaning additional inspection efforts. And one of the things we did do, so the council approved a construction contract a couple meetings ago for addressing the non-compliant curb ramps. So we're doing that this year in advance of the project next year, just to help streamline the construction so it's focused just on paving and not the ADA component. The T33, that is, so let me back up. So on the May Creek, we've been focusing on the May Creek Park Drive corridor. In 2022, we did the segment from 116th to 121st. And then right now we're under design for the segment from 121st to 124th with a bid additive or alternative to then connect to the roundabout with a concrete sidewalk. Right now it's a soft surface, excuse me. And then we will begin the design of T33, which is the eastern portion of that corridor. From the limits of that project are from the roundabout to Eden's Grove subdivision, and that would be preliminary design.
Any questions? No, go ahead.
Parks, similar to swim, we talked about this at the July meeting, the second July meeting, I believe. And so this information is similar. The one thing that has changed is we increased the P004, which is a general park improvement project, and that cost estimate is reflective of resurfacing the tennis courts at Lake Bourne Park. We've identified that in previous years, and through COVID and other staffing issues, that project has just kind of been delayed for a few years. And we did apply for a grant. The Recreation and Conservation Office, the RCO, has a new grant program this year for deferred maintenance. And so we have submitted an application. It was about a week or two ago. We submitted that application, and it's 100% of the cost, no match required. So they've got a rapid timeline on that. So we should find out before the end of the year whether or not we're successful on that. But regardless, we'd still like to move forward with that project. The tennis courts get a lot of use, and there's been some deferred maintenance, mainly cracking on the surfaces of both courts. And with this work, we would expand the current layout so that there would be a total of four pickleball courts versus the 2 that are there now. The cemetery fence replacement, that'll be construction. The design is underway now. And then starting the design of the next phase of the Lake Bourne park plan improvements, as well as the Hazelwood Boardwalk. Any questions on any of those projects?
I do have one, Director Bronze, Councilmember Lakotia.
So currently, we are seeing the revenues and expenditure. Expenditure is more than the revenues. So that's including all the grants, or do we still expect more grants to go in there, which we have not included?
Yeah, so that only includes grants that we've been awarded.
Correct. So for 2024, the only grant at play would be the tennis court resurfacing, so that'd be $50,000. But we do plan to submit an application for the P22, the next phase of that. There's a couple different opportunities. There's the King County Parks Levy grant, and that is in, I believe, odd numbered years. So we would apply for that in 2025. We submitted an application for the design of that project in 2023, and we're not selected. Then in 2024, the RCO, the Recreation and Conservation Office, has their biannual grant program where we could submit an application for the Lake Bourne Park as well. And then we're planning for legislative request. Let's see, 2024 is going to be the larger year. 2023 was the larger year. So 2025 would be the next budget year. So that would be potentially we target the Lake Bourne Park since we were successful in getting some legislative funding for that. In 2024, it's a mid-budget year. So we'd potentially look at maybe looking at something for the Hazelwood Boardwalk since that's retrofitting a failing structure. But again, the revenues and expenditures, since it's looking at a long duration program, so each year you may have larger projects and lower revenues, and then other years you might have vice versa. And there's also a balance that is present for capital.
So
That's not
what happens
reflected
here? Do we, right now it's just a budget. We're budgeting it this way. But are we going to spend more than the revenue, or we'll just postpone some of the projects and move it into the following year?
Ultimately, that would
No,
be the council's
we would spend
decision.
more than the revenue.
Yeah, but the plan would be that we would spend fund balance for 2024.
So
But
we
like
won't-
Jeff was saying, we're going to have years where it's the opposite, where we're adding fund balance because of the projects that get done, or just the timing of projects. And so, but right now the budget would be that we would use fund balance.
Yeah, but then even for the following years, it all looks negative, the fund balance.
I'm sorry.
Even for the following years, even for 2024, 25, we are still in the red as the ending balance. There's still deficit. Okay, you'll keep using the balance there. But you still have to maintain a 25% in this case also, or?
For the capital funds, I would have to look at our policies. I don't know if that's true
There's-
for the capital funds.
You don't have to maintain anything, you can just spend to the balance.
I believe our policies do have the 25% requirement on the capital funds, but it was one thing that we talked about possibly changing for this very reason, that we have high years and we have low years, but we continue to have a healthy fund balance to help with those lower years.
I think that's all we got.
Director Bronze, anything else?
No, I do not have anything else. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any additional questions for City Manager Pingle? Councilmember Clark?
City manager, earlier this year, and I'm sorry, I only thought about it when I looked at one line item here, but you had insurance, and it's distributed, obviously, but did you had mentioned earlier this year that we were looking at different insurance provider? Did I remember that right, or not?
So, what we plan to do, simply because we're not overly satisfied with WCIA's approach. WCIA as a service provider is fantastic, but they certainly are expensive. Our contract with them, our agreement with them requires us to provide a 1-year notice for moving away from them. Our plan is to provide that notice so that we have the opportunity to go shop. And then if we decide we want to move to something different, we've put that opportunity in place. That would be a 2025 issue, not a 2024 issue.
Anything else? All right. Director Chambers, anything to add?
Not at this time. I do want to apologize for not having the revenues in your books. That was my fault.
No worries, thank you. All right, I will give you back 14 minutes of your time before our regular meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. This is Mayor Linda Newing calling to order the Newcastle City Council regular meeting of Tuesday, October 3, 2023. The time is 7 p.m. This public meeting is being recorded and may be viewed later on the city's YouTube channel. Please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, City Clerk Westman, will you please call the roll?
Councilmember Griffin. Here. Councilmember Villaseñor. Here. Councilmember Lacotia.
Here.
Councilmember Charbonneau. Councilmember Clark. Here. Deputy Mayor Sherlock.
Here.
And Mayor Newing.
Whoa, that was fast. I'm here.
Fast talker. All here, Mayor.
All right. Okay. And that brings us to 4. All right. Is there any objection to approval of tonight's agenda as presented? Councilmember Clark?
I move to add an agenda item, discussion of city council member conduct.
Second.
Attorney Chambers. We're good? Okay, thank you. All right. It's been moved by Councilmember Clark, seconded by Councilmember Lacotia, to add item to our general business, a discussion on council member conduct that would become item 11.1 under general business. Councilmember Clark, would you like to speak to your motion?
Thank you, Mayor Newing. So during our last meeting, there was a discussion, and then subsequent to that meeting, Councilmember Villaseñor sent out a public email identifying himself as a council member, and in that email, he said, I accused him of a bribe. That's patently false, and it violates our Newcastle Municipal Code standards of conduct in several sections. I sought 2 legal opinions. This does not rise, fortunately for him, to a level of ethics violation, according to our code, because it's poorly written. But there are standards of conduct that are violated. And when we all signed on to this chamber as a council member, we swore an oath of office to uphold the Constitution and the Newcastle Municipal Code. So it's important for us, if we are a body that's going to uphold a standard of integrity, as we swore to do, that we discuss this false charge. So I'm prepared to do that.
Councilmember Lacotia, anything to add?
I think Councilmember Clark did it well.
Okay, the motion on the floor is to add an item to tonight's agenda regarding council member conduct. That item would become 11.1 under general business. All in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Okay. Now, is there any objection to approval of tonight's agenda as amended? Councilmember Clark.
I move to add another agenda item, discussion of public safety.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Clark, seconded by Councilmember Lacotia to add item to, of public safety to that item would become item 11.2 under general business. Councilmember Clark, would you like to speak to your motion?
Thank you, Mayor. Unfortunately, at our last meeting, our discussion of public safety was shot down 4-3, and this is our number 1 priority. So I will point out that you may have heard in the news recently that Target has closing major stores across the U.S., including in Seattle, and the reason is crime. And one of the reasons they're doing that, of course, is there's no police, and the reason there's no police is because they have weak city councils. So they have lost track of their number 1 priority, which is public safety. So it is our job to make sure that public safety remains the highest priority in this city. So Chief Kajuhiro has proposed a reserve officer program. I mentioned it last meeting. And he also brought forth somebody to give us a demonstration of license plate readers. So I propose that we discuss redirecting funds from our marketing technical assistance and downtown improvement plan to the tune of $150,000 for a 5-year plan to install reserve officers and license plate reader cameras. That will leave $100,000 remaining in that fund. And the reason I suggest that is because this is a fund that's already been budgeted and set aside. And as I mentioned into the last meeting, we do not want to raise people's taxes. We don't want to impact our budget in future years because we're taking away money that, we'd have to tax people or find another source of revenue. This is money that's already set aside. We can improve the downtown and our community by increasing public safety. So my discussion in this agenda item would be to discuss this and reallocate funds.
Councilmember Lakota, anything to add?
In the last meeting, we had a public comment on break-ins that happened in our downtown area. So public safety becomes a key. And since in the last meeting it didn't get passed, I think we should reconsider at least in this meeting and prioritize public safety.
Councilmember Charbonneau.
Thank you. I'm going to vote no, and I'd like to explain my no vote. I think it's a worthy conversation to have. I think I don't mind personally whether it comes via planning calendar or motion. I think it's improper to have the conversation, though, without our police chief present. I think it's improper to have the conversation without our staff being able to prepare for this, because I'd rather actually have a meaningful conversation about it rather than, I feel like if we're just throwing numbers out with stuff that no one is aware of before the meeting, it frankly feels like grandstanding to me, and I would like to actually have a meaningful conversation as opposed to just throwing it out there because it's, something someone is angry about. So I'm going to vote no. I'm happy to have a meaningful conversation about it. Let's have a conversation about the reserve program. Let's do it with our police chief here, where we're not sitting here and saying what he needs, what he wants. Let's have him talk to us ourselves. Let's have our staff prepare for it. Let's have our staff bring it forward. There's a good way to go about doing this and not a divisive way. Let's do it in a thorough process.
Okay, motion on the floor. Councilmember Clark.
So Chief Kajihira was very clear to us in both his presentations and his emails about what he thought was important to the city. So understand, if he was here, that would be great, but our decisions, we already have enough information to make a decision. We already know that crime is a problem and it's getting worse. We already know what the chief has put forward for a reserve officer program. We already know what he's put forward for the license plate readers. Whether he was here or not, it doesn't change those numbers and those desires of his. And this is not a spur of the moment angry thing. Am I angry about crime? You bet I am, right? We should all be, and that's why we should talk about it. So, if there's anger, it's anger at the criminals that we need to do something about.
Okay, motion on the floor to add an item to our general business, and that item would be public safety and become item number 11.2. Motion was made by Councilmember Clark, seconded by Councilmember Lakota. All in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. Motion fails 3-4 with Council Members Charbonneau, Villasenor, Deputy Mayor Sherlock, and Mayor Newing dissenting. Okay, moving on. And I actually have a mayor comment that is on that same path, so just public comment. I'm going to defer to our city attorney Chambers for some words of wisdom concerning. I apologize. Okay. Is there any objection to approval of tonight's agenda as amended? And that amendment would be to add item 11.1, council member conduct. Seeing none, please show the agenda as approved as amended.
Thank you, Mayor. Before public comment, I'd just like to make a brief statement because it's election season again. And I've been asked to provide comments regarding the state law as it relates to the use of public facilities and election campaigns. In short, state law, RCW 42.17a.555, prohibits the use of public facilities to assist a campaign for election of any person to office, or to support or oppose a ballot proposition. The Public Disclosure Commission is the state agency with jurisdiction to enforce this statute. The Public Disclosure Commission interprets this statute very broadly to include a prohibition on using the public comment period during an agency's public meeting for these purposes. This applies to council member comments during a public meeting as well. To avoid any potential for violations of this statute, please refrain from making comments that support or oppose a candidate for office or a ballot measure. Please have your comments address issues relating to city business or city functions, not campaign or election issues. This includes references to election or campaign materials such as letters, flyers, or similar communications. The city thanks you for keeping your remarks focused on city issues.
Thank you, City Attorney Chambers. All right, with that, I will go ahead and open the public comment period. I do have one member of the audience signed up, and I will call upon that person first, Carol Simpson. And just a reminder, please state your name and the neighborhood in which you reside, and you will have 3 minutes. There is a countdown clock on the podium. Welcome.
Hi, Carol Simpson. I live in the Vineyards. That's part of Olympus's Division 4 of the Olympus. And I just wanted to say I'm really glad to be back. I'm not so concerned about crime in Newcastle. I just left my house empty for 6.5 weeks. I was very glad to come home and find it just as I left it. Thank you very much for vacation house checks. I made sure to do that. I made sure my neighbors knew I was gone and that they would be looking after my home. I even discovered there's these new light bulbs that are photosensitive and they come on and off when the sun goes up and when the sun goes down. I didn't have to worry about an electronic thing to turn my porch light on this time. So it goes on and off by itself. This is terrific. Coming across the Continental Divide in Wyoming was quite an experience after driving through, I think it was 8 other states before getting there from Florida. And I'll remind you that in Florida, every pond has an alligator. There's a whole different stormwater system there, and they get a heck of a lot more rain than we do. But someday we may get that kind of rain. New York just got humongous rainstorm. We need to be prepared. Emergency preparedness is important. How much we have in our cumulative reserve fund for emergencies is important. And I see a council that's shirking their responsibility in having a really serious discussion in how much money should be retained in the cumulative reserve fund. This is a good time to do it. It's not on your agenda. But coming council meeting and not having talked to your fellow council members and send an email to your staff to alert them that you would like to put something on the agenda so they can be prepared is not the way to be a good council member. I learned that. It took me 12 years. You got to have your fellow council members behind you. Put it on the agenda. How many business meetings have you had recently where there's not been anything on the general business? What are you getting done? You're approving consent agenda. You're having a study session. That's great. You've all got elected. You had agenda things you wanted to accomplish, but you're not putting it on the agenda. When you have a planning calendar, discuss the things you'd like to put on the agenda and let Scott know ahead of time. Let the mayor know ahead of time. They need to be prepared. It would be nice to have the fire department and the police department and others here to talk about public safety and not just pick and choose what you heard about public safety. Sometimes we all hear what we want to hear. The negative. Is the glass half full? Are you a half full council? Do you focus on what you don't have or what you do? I think there's members who focus on the downside and not on the full side.
Thank you. Additional comment? Good evening and welcome.
Allison Sweeney, Olympic Ridge, and my husband and I own Frosty Barrel down at the Newcastle Commons. I'm actually super disappointed that Chief Kajihiro is not here tonight. I'm actually sitting up here to give him public praise. So 2 weeks ago, when I stood before you and asked for our community to come together and talk about safety, that meeting was on a Tuesday. By Friday, I had heard from Chief twice with updates and action plans, and he had talked to my landlord, and we had already received a text from our landlord. So things are happening down at the Newcastle Commons, and we're just really excited about that. But just to really celebrate that and know that when we do come together, we can find solutions to problems. But that's what it takes. It takes us talking to each other. It takes us reaching out. It takes us talking to somebody we haven't spoken to before. And so I'm just really excited to go to Coffee with a Cop tomorrow. And I'll tell him to his face that I came here tonight and I just wanted to sing his praises in the most public forum that I could. So thanks.
Thank you. Any other public comment? I don't see anybody virtually, so I will go ahead and close the public comment. Okay, moving on to council report or council comments. Councilmember Clark, do you want to kick us off?
Thanks, Mayor Nguyen. I mentioned last meeting that Veterans Day is Saturday, November 11th. We'll be having a service out here at the flagpole. I had mentioned 8:30. I apologize. It's going to be at 8 o'clock. And the reason I'm doing that is because I'd forgotten that that's also the same day that the Auburn Veterans Day Parade, because normally it doesn't fall on Veterans Day, but this year it does. So that's at 11 and I have to be there. So 8 o'clock at the flagpole, come on out. We'll have a short service. I hope to get more participation, and I'll put out a notice and I'll pass something to the city clerk to be published about that. But if you get a chance to go to the Auburn Parade or go to Houma National Cemetery, those are amazing things. They're just spectacular on those days and to celebrate veterans in general. So, thank you.
Councilmember Charbonneau, what do you have?
Thank you. It was great to see people at the open house for the comp plan. I got my next door neighbor and her 1-year-old son to come even, and was Newcastle's youngest resident there. Thank you to all our planning commissioners that worked really hard on that, and all our staff for arranging that. It was good to interact with folks. I'm very pleased to see tennis court resurfacing and a grant for that on our consent agenda. I know we won't talk about it because it'll just roll through, but I think that's a great thing. People come from all over for that service, so I think that's awesome. And then I'm really excited. I mentioned it briefly last meeting, but I've talked with our librarian, Vicki Heck, and our city manager, and I'm going to be working on reaching out to Bellevue Fire and working with them on providing a CPR AED training program that would be, we're figuring out exactly who the audience would be, but it would be open to the public. So it's a really great service that I'm excited as someone that's trained myself to get to offer to folks. So stay tuned for that, and I will keep folks posted.
Councilmember Lakota?
Thank you. I'll definitely sign up for the CPR program. I need one. Last Saturday, we resumed our tech classes for seniors, for older adults by Teens Who Care, after a few months break in summer, and we got an amazing response. I was very glad to see a lot of our senior citizens of Newcastle taking advantage of it, and not just the older people, but also high school students from our local areas who came and volunteered. So just want to say thank you to all the volunteers as well as the citizens who came and took advantage of it and spread the word. And we are going to have our next class October 28th, and hope to see more and more seniors come there. And since we already talked about that, we want to have programs for them in our city, and we have this great program that happens in the Newcastle Library every month. Thank you.
Councilmember Villasenor?
Thank you. Good evening. Welcome to October, where in the state of Washington it is Filipino Heritage Month. As recently as 2010, Filipinos were the largest Asian ethnic group in the state of Washington, and today still rank in the top 3. So I'm proud to be part of the Filipino community, and I'm very happy that my heritage is recognized by the state. Thank you.
Councilmember Griffin? Deputy Mayor Sherlock?
Thank you. Good evening. Just wanted to echo the praise to the staff and the Planning Commission for the wonderful open house. I wasn't there, but I have heard from several people that it was really well run and just a lot of great information. So thank you, Director Hoffman and your staff and the planning commissioners. If you're out there listening, you all did great. Thanks.
Okay, moving on to reports. Mayor's report. I do have a few things to similarly echo and recognize October being a recognition month. October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. This is often a silent crime. It doesn't go reported as often as it should, unfortunately, and there are some people who suffer tremendous loss from it. Back in 2014, I was working with a woman who was a very unfortunate victim of domestic violence, and she was brutally murdered, her and her mother. It was, and I was reminded when I got off the elevator at my office yesterday that, because they do a tribute to those who have been lost to DV. So please reach out. We do have programs to help you. Not the city, but there are services that you can be directed to. I also want to mention I had a conversation with Chief Kajihiro just a few days ago, actually, and we talked about a variety of things. And one of the things that we talked about was how he has stepped up patrol, nighttime, wee hours of the morning patrol throughout our business community. An example of this is posting an officer 3 early morning shifts a week down at the Commons, along Coal Creek, and those hours are 12 a.m. to 6 a.m. That seemed to be a target time for when a lot of crimes are happening. And in addition, he and Officer Martin or Deputy Martin will be hosting a business forum October 25th. There'll be 2 sessions, one 12 to 1 p.m., the other one 5 to 6 p.m. I know for sure I plan to be at the 5 to 6 p.m., but unfortunately I'll be traveling back via airplane about noon, so I probably won't make that one. But I encourage our business owners, our managers of businesses to please attend one of those sessions. I know Chief is very, very focused on helping you and giving you some CEPTED information and directions. So I believe those will be very, very informational. I had the great honor of participating in the rededication of the Seattle Revival Church on Saturday evening. They rededicated that facility and named it Eden. It was a lot of fun, very well attended, very well organized, and I want to thank Pastor Darren Stott for inviting me to share that moment of joy with his congregation. And that's all I have. So council committees, do we have Finance Committee?
Finance Committee did meet. We did approve a change in the finance software that the finance department will be using. A change that maps much closer to what we're doing and saves us money. So double good. But otherwise, you'll see the fruits of the labor as through budget season from the Finance Committee.
Thank you. Economic Development?
We will be meeting next week, and everyone is invited to attend. It'll be a good one. Community Development Director Hoffman will unveil some signs that we've been talking about for several months now, so very much looking forward to that.
And those are the wayfinding signs?
Yes, sorry. I'm like inoculated in my own world with the signs forever. The wayfinding signs potentially placed along different arterials in Newcastle.
Okay, thank you. Salary and Benefits Committee did not meet. Regional committees, any regional committee reports? Councilmember Charbonneau?
Thank you. PIC has been on, Public Issues Committee has been on recess for a couple months, but I attended the Regional Transit committee, and they had a really great presentation. There were some news reports that sort of wrongly reported about fentanyl and drug use on our public transit system, and there was a really great and thorough report. I wish it's very well done with a ton of different numbers, but essentially showing that public drug use is not a threat to anyone in our public transit systems, on Metro, on anything like that. It is no threat to anyone. Very well done by the county and the other bodies, and just encouraging people to ride Metro. And it is currently the week without driving, if you want to challenge yourself and see how really reliant you might be on a car to get around.
Okay. And we do not have items 7.4 and 7.5, the planning and CAC report. City Manager Pingle, what do you have for us?
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. Just a couple of things wanted to make sure are brought to your attention as well as the public. A couple of them are in the report that's in the packet. The first one, just bringing attention to the Crosstown Trail project is underway. You'll notice it's fenced and moving forward. They were installing pilings this last week, and so very under construction at Lake Warren Park right now. The other one is City of Bellevue, the emergency culvert replacement project that they're doing that will affect Newcastle Golf Club Road. We've heard from them that is anticipated to begin middle of October. They are required to give a 7-day notice. And our understanding from them is that their practice is to give a 10-day notice. And so hopefully we have plenty of notice and we can get that posted and get the information out at all the different ways that we can when we get that notice and can let people know. I let the council know, but just for the public's benefit, we will have Holly Kochi, our lobbyist with Gordon Thomas Honeywell, here at the November 7th meeting. She'll give us a session preview along with we can have any additional legislative agenda discussion at that point as well. I will get a draft out to the council before then, and just so that we've had a chance to look at it and ask any questions and whatnot before we get to November 7th. And then just wanted to piggyback on the Business Watch meeting that Mayor Newing mentioned. It will be here in council chambers for both sessions, the 12 to noon and the 5 to 6 on October 25th. That's all I got.
Thank you. Okay, consent agenda. Is there any objection to tonight's unanimous consent agenda as presented? Okay, seeing none, please show the consent agenda approved as presented. All right, now we have the star of the show, the public hearing. Item number 9.1 is the public hearing for the preliminary 2024 city budget. I will turn it over to Director Chambers to introduce, and then we'll take some, we'll open the public hearing.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good evening, Council. Good evening, public. Tonight we are going to have the first of a couple public hearings for the 2024 budget. This is our preliminary operating and capital budget. It was dispersed. I apologize, the agenda bill was due on Thursday. We got the budget posted Friday morning, so it was on the 29th, not the 28th. Printed copies were given to all of the council members if they preferred that over the digital copy that's online. And tonight is our first public hearing regarding the budget as a whole. So real quickly, the preliminary numbers are $28,447,973. This is slightly higher than the 2023 budget of $23,582,624. The operating portion is $15,145,588. The capital portion is $7,070,463, and the transfers are $5,013,464. For those of you that were here already, we did some discussions on some of the funds earlier. We'll have the remainder of them at the budget study session on October 17th. And at this time, we can open it up for comment.
Okay, any questions? Okay, I will open the floor for public testimony. This comment period is on the budget only, so general comments, that you will have another opportunity at the end of the meeting. After testimony, there will be an opportunity for council member comments, after which we will close the public hearing and proceed. All right, any questions about the order of the public hearing? Okay, any comments? Do I have anybody signed up? Oh, thank you. Carol Simpson, I'll call you up first. And again, please state your name and the neighborhood in which you reside, and you will have 3 minutes.
Carol Simpson, I live in the Vineyards. I have some public comment, but I also have some questions for you. This is going to be a pop quiz for you council members to see how well prepared you are during this year's budget season. This building, the city moved in as a tenant in what year? Anybody know?
We don't
I'm doing
typically
a pop quiz.
respond to questions, so.
Okay, then raise your hand if you know.
No, actually, we don't respond to questions during public comment, but
Okay,
staff
then
will know
I'll rephrase.
questions.
I'll rephrase. The city moved into this building in 2011. There were 21 employees. In 2014, the city purchased the annex. The city had 23 employees at that time. My comment is one about the generator. Do we need 2 generators? Do we need one at City Hall? And do we need one at the annex? And how many employees will this generator serve? Generators run an emergency when we have a power outage. Where is the emergency center for the city? Do you know? Do the city staff know? Where's the emergency center? Do you we really expect interest rates to go down at the end of next year? What percentage of the actual spending in 2022 was on salary and benefits? 35%, 40%, 22%? It was 22.3% of what actually was spent was on salary and benefits of the total general fund spending in 2022. I'd like to be able to read the 23 budget and the 24 budget and know how much was spent on salaries and benefits in those budget documents, but I can't find it. So go through this with a fine-tooth comb. I've already started, have you? Some of you have, I know. You can do just a blanket motion. I want to reduce the general fund budget by $50,000. It's useless to try and do line item stuff. It's useless to try and get your fellow council members to vote on a line item. What you're doing is you're giving, what was it, $15 million to run the city in the general fund budget. If you want to reduce that by 5%, 10%, make a motion. It's still up to them how to spend that money. Yes, there's some guidance. We don't want to have this, we don't want to have that. You can argue all day about that. I've learned in 12 years, it's useless. Okay? Hope that helps.
Any additional comment for the public hearing on the budget? And no virtual, so I will close the public hearing. Any additional comments from council? Councilmember Villasenor.
Thank you very much for preparing this. I really like the fact that where we landed. So I will take an additional closer look to see where I think we can improve. But thank you for making an excellent first draft of this. Thank you.
Councilmember Clark?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Carol Simpson, for your comments. You have good advice and appreciate it. I will answer one question you asked about the generators, and this is going to surprise some people because for saving money, but I do believe that having a generator at each location makes sense. And I'll tell you why. Because if there's a true emergency, yes, this is our emergency response center, but we want to be able to have our public works department with all their equipment available to be able to respond to that emergency. So it would be nice if it all was in one building, but it's not. So I do support. I'm skeptical of the prices, though. I'm going to talk to Director Bronze. The numbers don't make sense to me because I just bought a generator for where I work, and those numbers are really, really small. So, but I do agree in concept that having 2 generators makes a lot of sense. But otherwise, thank you for your comments.
Anything else? Okay, I would like to ask the council, as you review the budget prior to our October 17 meeting, if you have questions, please email City Manager Pingle and copy City Clerk Westman and me, so we're aware, and we will do our best to have all the information for that meeting, so we're not doing this back and forth. So, okay. All right. So, okay, public hearing is, we closed that. All right, moving on. No unfinished business. We do have an item added to general business, item 11.1, council member conduct. Councilmember Clark, you added this to the agenda. I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mayor. I mentioned earlier, and I'll just restate what I said. So, and I'll start from the beginning. So when I took this office, and we all take this office, we're going to expect that people call us names and call us lazy or bums or whatever. Those are just names. I could care less, right? This world is all about feelings. I don't really care about that. But when a specific charge or issue is leveled against me with specificity that's not true, that's called slander. And I don't appreciate that. So looking at our code, we all take an oath of office that says in part, we will uphold the municipal code and all other legal enactments of the city of Newcastle. It doesn't say we should do part of the code or portion of the code. So in our code, we have a section 2.68.040 that deals with standard of conduct for city officials. On September 24th, Councilmember V.S. Junior sent out a public email identifying himself as a council member. In his email, among other things, he stated emphatically that I accused him of bribery. The exact quote is, Councilmember Clark accused Councilmember Sherlock and myself of taking bribes from the business community. This is false. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to offer a challenge to the public here. I don't have a $100 bill, but pretend this is a $100 bill. Anybody who can go back to the last meeting and listen to the audio recording from the beginning to the end that can find anywhere in that recording that I said Councilmember Villasenor took a bribe can get $100. Now this is only a piece of paper and I'm not worried about having to give it out because it's false. Our municipal code section 2.68.040A reads in part, officials shall refrain from abusive conduct, threats of official action, personal accusations, or verbal attacks upon the character or motives of other council members, city staff, or the public. By saying that by saying that I accuse him of bribery, Councilmember V.S. Junior is making a false personal attack against my integrity and character in violation of our code. In addition, the code reads in part, officials shall not compromise themselves for advancement, honor, or personal gain. Because Councilmember Villasenor is currently running for elected office, these accusations take added meaning. He's using the false allegations to promote his election campaign, thus compromising himself for advancement and personal gain. And as I mentioned, at no time during the entirety of the meeting will you hear me or anybody else accuse him of bribery. It is very reasonable to assume that an educated person such as Councilmember Villaseñor should know the difference between a conflict of interest, which is competing interests, and a bribe, which is a serious crime. Therefore, Councilmember Villaseñor is also in violation of an additional part of the code, which reads in part, officials shall maintain truthfulness and honesty. By deliberately using the term bribery, which nobody mentioned, he is being dishonest and untruthful. Furthermore, he represented himself as a council member and has not explicitly stated that the views he presents are his own. This is in violation of Section G, which reads in part, while presenting their individual opinions and positions, officials shall explicitly state they do not represent their body, or the city of Newcastle, nor will they allow the implication that they do. The failure to clarify his accusations are his own gives the impression he's representing an official city position. I'm sorry that we have to do this, but our council is required to uphold a standard of conduct, and it's not optional. Our integrity is what the public relies upon us for to carry out our jobs. Okay, so some of you out there are smiling, I get it, you don't like it, but this is a clear violation of our standards of conduct. So I request that this council takes a reprimand or some sort of, and I know how the vote's gonna go, let's be honest, right? But I want this public knowledge because I did not accuse him of bribery, and I'm not gonna be accused of a slanderous thing. You call me names, I don't care, call me a jerk, call me lazy, whatever, right? And maybe sometimes I am. But don't say that I did something that I did not do specifically. So I call upon this council to hold Councilmember Villaseñor accountable. Now, we can't use our code of ethics because that's very specific into other things, and our code points us in another direction. Unfortunately, it's not written well, like I said, but this is a legislative matter to be decided by this body. So I call for a reprimand from this council. Thank you.
Councilmember Villaseñor.
Thank you. The newsletter I sent out is a newsletter I've been sending out for a very long time. Now, the words at the very top say perspectives. And I don't think anyone believes that I am representing the city in any way, shape, or form. My newsletter does include a disclaimer. However, it did fall off due to a template change. So in that regard, you're right. It doesn't have the disclaimer on it that it usually does. But people have received that email before. That is on there. No one believes that I'm representing the city or the city council in my perspective on what went down 2 weeks ago. Now, I stand behind everything that I said in that newsletter. Councilmember Clark is well within his rights to ask for censure or whatever he'd like from this council. You're certainly free to pursue formal charges against me. But in lieu of that, you're the one who opened our meeting with an accusation of improper behavior on my part, which, in my perspective, is baseless. So we can get into a battle of words about it. We could start finger pointing at each other. But my perspective and my point of view is very clear. I'm sure it's not hard to find a copy of the email that I sent. So the public can judge that as they want to, but I don't believe that my behavior is any more worthy of censure than yours is. So this can, and I can't believe we're using council time to have to deal with this. So if there's a motion, I'll second it.
Councilmember Charbonneau.
sorry, I don't know where this would fall in. I guess, for me personally, I haven't seen the exhibit in question, and that's just a matter of me having, just not seeing it. I think if I was gonna, sorry, still processing a lot here. I think if you want to bring forward a desire to censure or reprimand someone, I think there would need to be the exhibit. I would need to be able to review the exhibit. First and foremost, I think there's a lot more to this. I'll let more folks talk, but I think that's at least a piece for me, that processing.
Attorney Chambers, I just have a procedure question. So, I don't know that there's action to be taken here, because isn't there a process for anything like censure or?
Well, not for a violation of 040. For violations of 030, and when I say 030, I mean Newcastle Municipal Code 2.68.030. There's a formal process for allegations of violations of that, and that is under section 080. The violations of 040, so 040 is aspirational, but it is a part of the code, and so yeah, it just is, but it's not actionable under 080 under the formal process. As the city council, however, you control your meetings, and you make motions and second them and vote on them as you feel fit.
Thank you. Councilmember Griffin.
The really sad part of this is that the town hall meeting we had over at Risden a day or so afterwards, one of the residents come up to me, and he was visibly shaken. He said he was terribly disappointed in the council. And I said, for what? And he says that somebody would accuse another person of taking a bribe in the council. And I told him that, to my knowledge, that did not happen in the council meeting. I said it was a different meeting because it was, there were tempers flaring about different things, and people didn't like the idea that there'd been indication that there was a conflict of interest of a couple of people. So, and he said, well, he'd have to go home and listen to it again all the way through, so to find out. But, you know, when we do things like that, it affects the citizens, not just the council, it's the citizens as well.
I'm going to address this matter. We're all electeds up here. Many of us have professional lives outside of this dais. We're all adults. We are compensated to conduct business, and we're compensated to conduct it professionally. I would really hope the individuals up here are bigger than that, and this can be put behind us. There was emotion in the room that night. And I just believe this council is better than making some, maybe unflattering comments or toward one another on the dais. I think overall, our code of conduct and how we conduct ourselves is of a higher standard. And I would really call upon the council to consider just turning the other cheek. This is a little bit, it's a little bit harsh toward each other, and I think we're better.
So I've made my point clear, and it's in the record, so I forgive Councilmember Villaseñor for his language in his email, and I'm moving on because I know that there will be no vote that would sustain this anyway, so moving on. I forgive you.
Thank you, Councilmember Clark. Councilmember Lakotia.
I think as a courtesy, what I would expect from Councilmember Willis-Knorr is to use the same forum that he used in his newsletter and at least ask for forgiveness and, use the same email distribution and ask for forgiveness and that all the allegation was all false. So as a matter of courtesy, I would expect that he would do that.
Councilmember Charbonneau.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you for your comments too, Madam Mayor. I wanted to sort of add on to what you're talking about. It took me a second to collect my thoughts. I'm human. I wanted to think about it for a second. I think when you hear us talking about these sort of things, you should be asking yourself, what is the reason that we're talking about these sort of things? Processes like that, you can state a lot of specific code numbers to make it sound official. You can say that, oh, perhaps this is a violation. You can raise questions to raise doubt in a lot of folks. But I think the important question is to ask, what is your goal there, right? I talked about agendas in our last meeting, and what is the agenda you're trying to meet? And I think it's ironic because we get a disclaimer at the start of every council meeting saying that we don't want to have, do not use a public facility, do not use public resources to campaign for election. And I think it's really, the agenda is a workaround way of the agenda for folks in bringing up these things and trying to create this drama, which is fully capable for us to handle between each other, interpersonally, not in a public setting, in front of everyone, where that's entirely, we have the means to do that, we have the means to contact each other. The purpose of that is a workaround of our city attorney of those legal matters to attack people that might be up for office, to come after people. So I really encourage you to ask, what is the purpose? Because we don't have to be having these conversations publicly like this. It's not necessary. There's ways for us to handle this. We can talk to each other person to person without dragging the public into it. And it's really saddening to me that as someone that's been a government nerd his whole life, that's gone to public meetings, that's just jumped in to these things, that people will jump in and be disenfranchised by seeing these sort of conversations. So I agree with our mayor about holding ourselves to a higher standard, and I agree about talking to each other if you have a problem with each other and not trying to push your own agenda conveniently at a time when there's elections going on. I think that needs to be called out, so thank you.
Councilmember Clark.
Nobody is setting an agenda. I'm calling out a behavior which we discussed and we ended, and you praised the mayor for her comments and then proceeded to say otherwise. So, yeah, this is not about an agenda, right? This is not. This is about civil behavior.
Councilmember Griffin.
Thank you, Mayor Newing. All of us received a procedures manual. In the procedures manual, it tells us what we're supposed to do when we sit up here. We need to understand it, read it, and make sure that we understand it so that we don't wind up in situations where we don't want to be. Because it clearly lines out what should happen from the start of your meeting until everything that we do as council members. If you haven't read it, you should. I've read it through a couple of times, and yes, I understand it pretty good. And I would encourage everybody else to do that, because if you're going to set up here and you're going to try to do business for the city, you need to understand what the rules are. Thank you.
Okay, moving on. Additional public comment. Do we have any additional sign up over there? Keeping me busy. All right, I've got two. Allison, you crossed your name. You're good? Okay. Next on the list is Carol Simpson. Again, name, neighborhood, and 3 minutes to speak. Countdown clock's on the podium.
Carol Simpson, I live in the Vineyards. Thank goodness for cell phones and internet. Talk about the pot calling the kettle black. 2020, when the new city attorney said that council members can send out newsletters on their own and express their own personal opinions. This is where everything went sideways. I pledge to bring better transparency to our local government, and this newsletter represents one of the ways I feel I can get this done. Councilmember Clark also provides a personal opinion. As a council member, those opinions should be based on facts, not lies. He states his opinions section of his newsletter, quote, his 2 cents worth, regarding the approval of a development agreement, quote, Councilmember Clark stated in his newsletter. The MOU was introduced at the first 2018 meeting right after several council members were sworn in. Suspicious, anyone? Unquote. Councilmember Clark did not refer to the public record to see when the MOU was initiated in 2018. He is casting aspersions on the 2018 council, which I was a member. This was false. Okay, if anybody is guilty of implying and doing the same thing that Councilmember Clark just implied about a fellow council member, he is. And I'm livid about that. Okay? This all started because of utility tax, because a certain council member was out campaigning against utility tax and expressing his own personal opinions. Everything went sideways in the next year. Okay, you guys got to resolve this. You got to look at your rules. You have to understand the hats you wear when you're expressing a council opinion, when you're expressing a personal opinion. And during public comments, when your personal opinions offend the city residents and businesses, you're not doing your job. And if you, as a council member, express those kinds of things, your disregard, your hatred of businesses, your condescension of businesses, don't think that you should ever be mayor. If there's any entity in this city that has their hand out, it's you. The city of Newcastle. Every year, the city is looking for handouts from the business community for events, for grants, for all of that. So watch your demeanor, because the people you're seeking handouts from don't appreciate how you speak to them.
Thank you. Any additional public comment? And seeing nothing on the floor, nothing virtually, I will close the public comment. That brings us to planning calendar. City Manager Pingle, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mayor. So you have in front of you what we have slated for October 17th so far. The main discussion there that I would ask council for any feedback on is we got through tonight's budget study session in decent time, but pushing the general fund specifically off and putting it by itself was on purpose, just so that we would have the time to do that. Is there a desire to start before 6 o'clock on the 17th? Okay. That's okay with me. I just want to make sure the council had an opportunity to say.
Deputy Mayor Sherlock.
Thank you. I don't have objection to that, but I'm wondering if there's some stuff we don't get to before 7, can we then maybe add it to the
Regular meeting.
the regular meeting?
We can.
Yeah.
And that's also, that was kind of the plan for tonight. If we didn't get through what we wanted to get through, we would put additional discussion on the regular meeting. We can do that again.
Okay.
I do want to point out for the October 17th meeting, we have several reports, presentations slated, and so it won't be, while we have a few things on consent and no general business, we do have a few things that will take some time, so just making sure the council's aware of that. We'll have our CAC chair reporting in person. That'll be our first opportunity that we have to do a quarterly financial report to the city council, which we haven't done in the past. And then we'll also have our CIP update, which generally has been fairly quick, but just want to make sure the council's aware that we have a couple of things, even though we don't have anything slated for general business, some things that will be time consuming. And I'll take any questions.
Any questions? Okay, seeing none. All right. With that, at 8 o'clock, I'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you.